Okay, before I even start this video, let me explain why this is not the review and why this is a separate video. And that is because I feel like something like this is going to be more opinionated, more of a long talk, and if I put it in the review, it would deviate from the actual review, and I'd be talking about this longer than I would be talking about anything else. And it's a lot of opinionated topics, and I would lightly touch upon it in the review, but this is more something where I'm talking about what I think should happen. That's not how you do a review. You do a review where you talk about what is there, not necessarily what could be, or at least you try to do that as little as possible. Either way, that's why this is a separate video. Review still coming, and let's go ahead and get started. What's up guys, it's me Zero to Kitsune, and today we are talking about Senran Kagura and its combat system. Now, to give a little bit of a backstory on this, a few months ago the developer of the Senran Kagura franchise tweeted about toning down the sexualization of the game in order for Western audiences, and my reaction was the same as when Arcana Heart oddly enough put out a similar tweet. I thought maybe the sexualization is not the only reason sales may be not doing as good in the United States as you think they should. It could be a contributing factor, and it probably is, but maybe it's not the main one. So I decided to take a look at the actual game, see how it performs, see how it works, and I decided to put a poll on my Patreon, see who agrees with this mentality and thinks I should do a review of the game. That's how we got here. And after playing the game for a while, I came to the conclusion that Senran Kagura's gameplay has certain times where it really does suck, and that's particularly in the early stages of the game and the end game, kinda. To put in perspective, when I'm saying early game, I'm talking about the early levels on easy mode, where you don't have your entire move list, you're first learning the controls and they feel all janky and weird. And when I'm talking about late game, I'm talking about playing the hardest difficulty, and yeah, with max characters, and how you have to abuse things such as the aerial Raves because ground combat is not safe and it's not satisfying to do. You basically play the game like the floor is lava and try your best to launch enemies and then aerial Rave from there. Or you super spam and use invincibility. Either way, not that enjoyable. The mid game though is pretty fun, playing the game on normal difficulty, leveling up units, and just using all your moves. That is tons of fun. I would strongly recommend, if you're playing Senran Kagura, just to play it on normal and level up a bunch of different characters. And try to avoid spamming supers. I know it's the most effective way to do, but if you do that, you'll just get bored. But without spamming, you end up seeing the enemies fight back, use unique attacks. You need to use different strategies with your normal attacks to break through certain units' guards. And it's a lot of fun. And if you limit usage of the aerial Rave, it'll be a much more enjoyable experience. But yeah, that's the general overview. It sucks in certain areas, but let's go into a little bit more detail on Senran Kagura's gameplay, starting with Senran Kagura's controls. Now, on a surface level, Senran Kagura has horrible controls. Everything is sluggish with long recovery animations that leave you vulnerable to enemy attacks. There's even this recovery animation to running, so you can't stop, turn, and run another direction. So it even makes something as simple as collecting items a chore. You end up running to them, overshooting, have to turn around, run to them again, then you hit them, have to go through a long recovery animation, and then you go off on your day. But if you just go a little bit deeper into the controls, then you have some options to remedy this. Many moves and actions can be jump cancelled at any time. They can be block cancelled during their recovery, or they can be dash cancelled once the attack connects. And different characters have different types of cancels that they can or can't do, so there's some learning and knowledge you have to learn about each and every character. And there's even some tech that you can use to bypass this. Like, certain characters can't jump cancel because they're heavier characters, but they can still jump through their block, so you just end up block canceling your attacks and then jumping from there. So there's some tech in the game, but I swear to God, someone at Tamsoft, those are the developers, thought it was a good idea for those cancels to be only available during the recovery. And I just can't agree with that. It makes it so it's not as easy to block and you don't ever feel safe in doing a combo inside of a large group of enemies, which is kind of one of the biggest appeals of the game. Now I understand that they didn't want the game to be just button mash spammy, and I can agree with that. That can also get very boring, but having players commit to these actions so strongly kind of makes you feel weak in a game where you should feel powerful and strong and able to take on the world. And in more specific areas, it makes it so characters with long strings and combos just get hit out of them most of the time on higher difficulties. Sure, on the lower difficulties like easy and normal, enemies basically don't attack you, or if they do, they use a light attack that doesn't stagger you. But on hard difficulty, everyone's trying to hit you, everyone's trying to stagger you, and a lot of characters have strings that are either really long or really slow, so they just get hit out of them constantly. In particular, high level characters, which means at the maximum levels you can't even do your full strings, or, and I think this is even more damning, slow characters, slow heavy hitters get completely fucked by this system. They can't even get more than maybe 1 or 2 attacks off on hard difficulty without getting hit out, and since you can't block cancel, you can see the attack coming, you can hold down the block button, but there's a good chance your attack animation won't end before you're hit. So it's just completely unsatisfying. Now I'm going to compare the game to what I think is the best Dynasty Warriors experience I've had, and it's not with any of the main franchise games, which I think is kind of funny. It's actually the One Piece spin-off Pirate Warriors, which I think is the best Dynasty Warriors game I've ever played. In that game, every attack can be dash cancelled, which makes the experience, you feel powerful, you feel fast, and it actually has a little bit of tech on it because when you dash cancel an attack, once you resume attacking, it starts from the next move in the chain. You don't restart the combo simply because you dash cancelled, which means you can repeatedly dash cancel through moves to get the part of the chain you really wanted for a particular situation and avoid the rest. In Senran Kagura, you can dash cancel, which means yes, you do avoid enemy attacks, but it starts you off at the beginning of the chain. Again, going back to the heavy character as example, you can land a single heavy blow, see someone's going to attack you, dash, and then you're back at the beginning with your first single blow. I played an entire stage where I was almost completely limited to the first 2 attacks because I was trying to dash cancel to avoid getting hit, so I never got to see the cooler moves further down the attack line, I guess you'd call it that. So I understand that maybe cancels make it too safe and you end up just spamming, but I think maybe they should have kept the ability to cancel, but instead gave it some sort of cost. Maybe make it so you have to burn one of those shinobi meters in order to just freely cancel, and it could come with a special particle effect, a special animation or something cool to go with it. But either way, adding a cost to it can make it so the game's not necessarily spammy. If you get an opportunity to just simply do a normal block out of the end of your animation, you use it, but if you see an enemy trying to attack you right now and you want to continue your combo, do a EX block, I guess you'd call it, block it, and then maybe have it so that continues your combo from the part where you left off instead of starting from the beginning. But that's the core controls. They're a bit janky. I see what they were trying to do, but I don't think it's executed nearly as well. But from there, I just want to talk about general gameplay stuff about the game and how it could be improved. First of all, bursting I think should be changed. Now I understand where this comes from, and if you're wondering what I'm talking about, bursting is when you press the down button, it might have been up button, but either way it basically makes you do a little spin, knock away all the enemies, and basically get you out of sticky situations. It costs I think 10% of your health, so you can't spam it, but still when you're attacking an enemy, and I'm talking about actual named units, not random grunts, just seeing them burst out of literally every combo makes you feel like, why even bother with combos? Why not either do singular powerful hits or spam aerial raves, which are a lot. I don't think they're immune to bursting, but you're in a better situation than getting knocked back onto the ground where you can be hit by multiple enemies. You're in the air where you can air recover and potentially attack. So having bursting be a catch-all get out of jail free card simply makes people use aerial raves more, or spam supers where they're completely invincible, and you're trying to avoid that. So, and I can't say, I don't know how they would change the bursting to make it so it doesn't have that adverse effect on the entire gameplay, but I do think something has to be changed. Another thing is more triangle extensions. All the characters have, I think, 2 or 3 triangle extensions that they have in their move list, and it's linked to multiple parts, so using normal attack twice into a triangle extension is the same as using normal attack 3 times into a triangle extension. That is something that is rather unique to the Senran Kagura series, as I think other Dynasty Warrior games, like I said, Dynasty Warriors One Piece did this really well. Everyone goes into a different animation, a different attack with a different effect. Now, to be fair, it's not like the characters have an insanely small move list. The problem is that the move list is split between 3 forms. So they have a long move list, but you only get to experience 1 or 2 of them in a stage. And that goes to my next thing that should be changed. They should link the forms a little bit better. Now, you start the game off in normal form, which has its own advantages and disadvantages, and even a whole leveling path exclusive to each form, which I think is really good. But from there, you get 2 options: either do a shinobi transformation to go into your more powerful form, or go into a frantic transformation, which strips all your clothes and puts you into an even more powerful form, but reduces your defense. And the way I see it, that completely separates a section of the move list. There's a section of the move list, either shinobi or frantic, that you will not experience depending on which form you took. So the move list ends up feeling a lot smaller. To me, and this is partially because I don't really see the point of frantic mode. Sure, it's a lot more damage, but the cost, especially on hard mode, the cost of taking maybe 3 or 4 blows ending your run just doesn't seem worth it to me. But the way I think it should be is you should go from normal mode and then you should transform into shinobi, and then you get the option of either normal or shinobi to go into frantic, which should restore your health bar and put you in this last ditch effort. Frantic, as far as I see it, should be a desperation mode available at any time if you're about to lose. That gives it a place in the move list, and then you always get to experience it. And maybe introduce something that allows you to get knocked out of the form so you get put back into normal. So again, you get to cycle different parts of your move list since they're split between 3 forms. But I don't know about getting knocked out of it. But the initial being able to go to frantic from any of them, I think would be a really good change. From there, aerial raves. Aerial raves are just too good. Something has to be done about them. This is another one where I'm like, I don't know what to do. Aerial raves are fun and they're cool to see, but having every combo end in an aerial rave, and in modes like shinobi mode where you can aerial rave into another aerial rave, into another aerial rave, into another aerial rave, that kind of gets a little bit repetitive. And that's one of the things you have to do about these games, these Dynasty Warriors games. You got to make the gameplay try to feel as not repetitive as possible, because at the end of the day it is repetitive, but you've got to mask it, give players other options and other things to do. So aerial rave needs to be changed. Maybe give aerial rave supers. I know you can do a team aerial rave, which is really cool and really fun, but that's not always accessible because not a lot of maps have you play with more than one, AI controlled teammate. Although the multiplayer you can do it. But so that's good. Not good. So aerial raves need to be changed. Next up, supers. Yes, supers. They are a lot of fun. They're really cinematic. They're really animated. I actually don't have that many problems with the supers themselves, but for God's sakes, there needs to be a slowdown when the super starts. And the reason for that is, and this is another comparison to Dynasty Warriors One Piece, where they oddly enough allowed you to just hold down a button and this would be where you're charging which super you're going to use, and it just slow down the entire game. Well, it wouldn't slow down the entire game because they had a multiplayer component. It only slowed down enemies within a certain radius of you. But the reason why I think that's a good idea is because a lot of these anime Dynasty Warriors games have this startup where there's this anime style animation where it's all unique and it's all fun to see. But during that time, enemies can be running out of position. I saw this in particular with Hanabi's level 3 super, where it's very particular about where the enemy needs to be to get hit by the entire thing. Or level 2, by the way, or level 1. Actually, Hanabi supers are really hard to land and kinda suck. But either way, that's because there's no slowdown, so you can start a super on an enemy that you know, yeah, I'm gonna hit them, and by the time Hanabi's done doing her cute animation, which looks really good, the enemy's behind you and just taunting you or something. They're not actually taunting you because AI is not that smart. Smarter AI would be fun, but you get my point. So that could be improved. And next one, this one's actually really big because I think this is an overall thing that should be changed just globally for all the characters. They need to have more special properties to differentiate themselves from each other. Because at the end of the day, when looking at this from a straight numbers perspective or an effectiveness perspective, a lot of the characters are the same. Character A, B, C, they all have like 3 normal attacks that only hit the enemies in front of them. Then they go into some AoE attack that hits all enemies around them, and then they go into a launcher. Rinse and repeat for most of the entire cast. It's just an animation difference. Though some of them are more unique than others, but I'm saying give more characters special, unique properties. Again, comparing it to Dynasty Warriors One Piece, many other characters had just completely unique gameplay functions, such as a character by the name of Perona having this unique fighting style where her actual basic attacks didn't do that much damage, but what they did was put a debuff on the enemy, and that debuff at any time could be procced by her triangle, by her neutral triangle, no square strings attached to it, and she would snap her fingers and detonate them and they'd explode, and that's where primary damage came from. This was attached to all of her normals, all of her triangle extensions, all of her specials. They all did some damage, but mostly they were done to set up large amounts of enemies to be debuffed so she could snap her fingers and deal a ton of damage. That made her feel completely unique to the other cast, and that was for a lot of characters. Characters like Nami could set up, I think she could set up little clouds that she could use electrical attacks from. Logia characters had invincibility frames in their moves. You get my point. In Senran Kagura, there are a couple of characters with unique features. Some characters can charge up their attacks, but with the current system in game that on harder difficulties that just leaves you vulnerable to being hit, maybe add some armor in there. One character in particular, Minori, has a very unique gameplay function where she can do a neutral triangle to buff herself. Well, it doesn't actually change any of her moves, but she puts a little toy inside of her bucket that she uses for normal attacks, and as you combo enemies, she's filling up a little invisible gauge that you can't see, and when you press triangle again, depending on how charged she was from doing normal attacks, she releases a different special from that. That is very unique, and it's something I wish I could see from other characters. And just off the top of my head, some characters that could benefit from something like this. Haruka, she's like this puppeteer machine character. She could potentially have like some attack that allows her to separate the puppet from her, and then you control the puppet for a little bit. That could be pretty cool to do. Or maybe characters like gun wielders actually having more ranged attacks rather than simply using the gun as a melee weapon and like having a neutral triangle that does a projectile attack. Looking at you, Ryobi. I was expecting, she has this long rifle and I was expecting a lot of long range rifle moves. And sure, her animations look fun. It looks cool seeing her spin around her rifle and smack people with the back of it. But that wasn't what I was expecting, and hell, even her supers, like her level 1 and level 2 supers, don't have nearly as much range as I'd expect from a character with a art style like that. Her character implies different than what she actually gets. So yeah, give characters new special properties. Another thing that could kind of go with that is give characters throws. Now I'm not saying like some press special command and you do a throw, and I'm not even saying specifically a throw. I'm using more the fighting game definition of a throw. A throw is something that puts both you and your opponent in a state that can't be interrupted and does an animation, a paired animation between you and your opponent, and then your opponent takes damage. That is what a throw is in its simplest terms. So I'm saying add that in, add certain triangle extensions that lock you and your opponent in an animation, not only because maybe only supers should be able to knock you out of that, so you'd be safe from standard mobs hitting you out of your combo for a little bit, but because that adds in another level of spectacle. Again, this is in comparison to Dynasty Warriors One Piece, where Luffy could literally grab an enemy, and spin them around and slam them on top of other enemies, and it looked a lot of fun, and it was a lot of fun to do. Add that in for certain characters in Senran Kagura. It could be really cool to see. And since you're a fan service heavy game, maybe have some fan service attached to them, add some groping or something. That's like, I think 2 or 3 of your characters are all about that from a lore and personality perspective, so you could add it into the gameplay. And finally, this is the last thing, and this is actually probably the biggest thing and something I'm going to bring up in the actual review, is add more to the game than just fighting. And when I'm saying that because in Senran Kagura, almost all of the single player stages I've experienced so far, I'm going to keep playing more before I do the review, but almost all of them have been one of 2 modes. Kill all the enemies, or kill all the enemies in a certain amount of time. And that is undercutting so much of the development of this game. The stages are massive and they're fun, and you had to traverse them because they're invisible walls, which normally I'd be against, but it encourages you to explore. There were plenty of hidden areas I didn't know about on a stage until I played the stage for a second time and decided just to run around it for a bit. And since the goal is just kill a bunch of enemies, you never see that. And it's weird because in normal Dynasty Warriors games, even they're a little bit more varied than that. In normal Dynasty Warriors games, there are huge maps where you have to, take an objective. You can sometimes lose that objective if you don't hold it, help on defense, hold a point, etc, etc. There are a lot of things you can do. And with huge maps, there's a wealth of content that could be done inside of those games, and the proof is that in the multiplayer of Senran Kagura, they have a ton of game modes that focus on the fact that the stages are huge. It's just not apparent in the single player. But yeah, that's what I've got to say about the actual gameplay of Senran Kagura. So when I hear someone say maybe we had to cut back the fan service, I'm just thinking, nah, maybe you need to add more to your game. And I'm not saying Senran Kagura Estival Versus, that's the one I'm comparing. I should have probably brought that up earlier. But I'm not saying that it's a bad game. I'm having plenty of fun with it right now. I'm just saying that it could be more. The potential of this game feels like it's been a bit squandered. Not even a bit. Feels like it's been squandered. So that's all I've got to say about Senran Kagura's gameplay. If you have an opinion on how Senran Kagura could be better, leave it in the comment section. Or if you think I'm wrong and that Senran Kagura as it is a perfect game, leave that in there and maybe leave an explanation why. I always read your comments, and I'm open to other views on this. But with that said, I will see you guys next time, and hopefully sooner with the actual review of this game than later. But either way, peace.